All right, so this is a review of weeks 1 and 2 leading up to the Section 1 quiz. So in week 1, we covered the structure of the class. We're talking about project-based learning. We're going to focus on UX design, software development. 4 quizzes, 25% each, taken on Canvas. And all my lectures I'll record. You have to do it on your own. It's going to take you like 4 times more to do it. The project is a painting app in Unity. We'll be learning Unity Game Engine. We'll be learning Visual Studio, which is a development environment where we'll be doing C# programming, high-level language similar to Java, OOP, object-oriented programming. We're learning about classes, objects, variables, methods, properties, and events. And each week we just do iterative development. We just build the app more and more, stronger, better features, fixing bugs along the way. With the end result at the end of the semester, we build a prototype. And it's just to get you familiar with the full software development cycle and coding in general. And then I introduced you to the first part of user experience design, thinking as you as a designer, thinking about the user of a piece of software. And we like to use user flow diagrams. They're really good with visualizing user journeys, our movements through different parts, our scenes of your app. And the first, so we can think about UX design. We can think about UI design, user interface design. We can think about product design as a larger umbrella term for everything. And the first skill set we learned is about cognitive walkthrough. So it's about thinking about yourself as the user and thinking about the actual thoughts that you're having, the feelings that you're having as you're trying to move through a series of steps to solve a task with a piece of software. And then as you do it for yourself, you kind of write out those action statements that you're verbalizing. What are you trying to do through the software's interface? And then each action statement can turn into a shape, an element in your user flow diagram. And that user flow diagram has a start and an ending point and one arrow of movement through it. And there's different types of shapes. And the one shape that where you can have a branching scenario or multiple paths is the decision diamond. And the other ones are the rounded rectangle for start and end, and the computer straight edge for computer process, and angled edge or parallelogram for user input. And eventually you train users to do cognitive walkthroughs, and you listen to them to see how they're using your app. Week 2, we covered the installation of the software we need, Unity and Visual Studio. We installed Unity Hub, which is like a management tool. It manages all your editor versions and all your projects. And from the hub, you can launch new projects, open projects. And Unity Editor is where you build your application, and Visual Studio is where you do your actual coding. And then I'll show you the connection points that you can look at. But basically, this is Unity Hub. You will create a new project, 3D project, put your name there, your folder location there. You should have created a project for this class. We'll be coding in this class. Once you open it, Unity Editor will take some time. It opens, it looks like this. If you just create some type of script anywhere, I right click for context menu, C# script. I'm just going to give it, it's always important to give it a name. I'll just call it like sample or something and press the enter key. The C# script is created. If I double click on it, it opens in Visual Studio. I already had Visual Studio open, but if you double click and it takes a while, Visual Studio loads up and it opens and it looks like this, you're good to go. If you had some issues, you can go into preferences and external tools, and you're going to have to connect up the Visual Studio exe on this side, which I went through a previous video. If this side's all connected up, you can go over to Visual Studio, go Tools, Get Tools, go down to the Game Dev section. and make sure that you install Unity here. Once you do all that, all your issues should be solved, and it should function as I just showed you. And then I went over the interface basics. So I went over Unity, I went over all these windows such as hierarchy, scene, game, inspector, project, console. These are dockable, movable, closable, floatable. You can do what you want to the interface. And these are all under general, and later on we'll be dealing with animation animator windows. And you can always go to layout and reset it to default if you mess something up. Project view is where your assets sit, your files. It's like your file manager. Your assets are resources for your project. You won't use them all, but those that do get loaded up into memory and get used up here in the hierarchy. The hierarchy usually has one Unity scene open. A scene is also an asset, and an asset is loaded from file into memory, and then it opens up and it's full of scene objects. Think of a scene as a modular part of your app or your game. You can't build an app or a game, a piece of software altogether, so you got to break it up into digestible parts. Those are scenes. And then a scene is also too big to just tackle at once, so it's composed of scene objects, as seen here. And if I open up Sprint 1, you'll see that I have many objects, most of them dealing with the UI, which we'll get into later. And it's this hierarchy, or this tree structure of scene objects or game objects. I should call them game objects. That are all the modular parts of that part of your app. This app is a prototype. It's just small enough to fit into one scene. If I click on a scene object, you will see its components over here. At the top is like the metadata, the game object data, like name, tags, layers. We'll get into tags and layers later, but the name is important. That's how you reference it. And you can turn like a scene object on and off the entire thing as needed. Usually you do that with code. Underneath here are components. These are objects as well. And we will be using them, talking them in more detail, but it's like modular pieces of the functionality. So small little parts of the features, the functionality. In this case, the light source, in this case, the camera. And these are like the working units, the working objects, and they're organized into scene objects, which are more for organization purposes within your scene. And it's very similar concepts to OOP. These are objects. Objects are like little modular running parts of your code that your program is organized into. I covered most of this. Oh, so each views. So the hierarchy view is good for looking at all your scene objects. When scene that's open, the scene view actually looks into the scene, into the virtual 3D world. And the game view is what the player, the user, will see. Inspector shows you all the details of whatever you have selected, either a scene object or an asset. Like, for example, this prefab here, we get more details about it. We'll cover that stuff later in class. The project view shows your files. Console shows warnings and messages that you're going to print out to. We're going to do quite a bit of that today in week 3. And I think that's all the views. And I'm going to spend a lot of time in the next lecture talking about how to move around and understand the virtual space. And so that's weeks 1 and 2.